Narrated by his widow Edith, it focuses on Spilsbury as a young man and the case that made his name, the infamous trial of Dr. Crippen in 1910, a case that remains controversial, with ongoing claims and counterclaims as to his guilt or innocence.
The Incomparable Witness by NICOLETTE.
I couldn't even cry standing there outside Golders Green Crematorium with the ashes of my husband in my hands. Such a big man in such a small box. The plaque on the urn was wrong. Bernard Henry Spilsbury, 1877 to 1947. Only one L in Spilsbury. I had to take it back. I wanted to cry, but I didn't have the tears. He ruined Christmas. I cannot begin to express how angry I was. Not because I can't find the words, but because I don't remember ever feeling such a volcanic emotion. For the first time in my life, I encountered rage, fury, absolute anger. What a silly word. Totally inadequate. I cried when my sons died. Peter and Alan, one to a German bomb and one to TB. Couldn't stop either of them. My husband was killed by his pride. He killed himself. Committed suicide rather than be seen to fail. And I don't care what anyone says, it is a crime. It is a sin. Even now, so many years later, I wish I could hate him. No, I don't suppose I could ever hate Bernard. But I do so desperately wish I could be indifferent to him, as I thought he was to me.
George, who's that young lady by the piano?
Alice?
No, the girl in the pale blue.
Oh, that's Edith Horton. Rather a good tennis player. Awfully pretty, don't you think?
Pretty? Yes, I suppose so. Very pretty.
Edith, may I introduce a friend of mine? He's desperate to ask you for a dance. This is Bernard Spilsbury.
How do you do, Mr. Spilsbury?
How do you do, Miss Horton? Would you, please... excuse me, I have to get back to the hospital.
Oh dear. Have I grown a second head or something?
No, I think he'd have probably stayed if you had. He's training to be a doctor. Sorry about that, he's awfully shy.
How sweet.
A steady sort, not by any means a star turn. Plays a bit of rugby.
Oh, really? Anything else?
Tennis.
Oh, splendid.
Or perhaps a game of doubles.
Well, it might bring him out of himself.
Yes! Marvellous! Game to us, I think.
I'm sure that last shot was out, Mr. Spilsbury. Positive.
Are you accusing me of cheating?
I am. I most certainly am. You must pay a forfeit.
Oh, now you've done it, Bernard. Oh, crumbs. Shall I hop on one leg, rubbing my tummy and tapping my head?
You can't.
I bet you I can. Watch.
For all his intense seriousness, Bernard was an excited child sometimes. Laughter bubbled out of him from a place kept too long in the dark by religion and a family tradition that seemed to come directly from Oliver Cromwell. Over the next 4 years, he progressed by careful increments to being the junior member of the notorious pathology team at St. Mary's, and we had progressed to playing singles. By the time he sat his finals, I was falling in love, and he was falling into the habit of having me in his life.
Bernard? Bernard! Wake up, do. It's your service.
Is it? Yes. Could I have a word? I've been thinking.
Yes, Bernard?
Now I've qualified.
Yes?
I rather like the sound of Dr. and Mrs. Spilsbury.
Yes. Oh, yes. It certainly has a ring to it.
You think so?
I do.
And might you consider speaking those two words in a different setting?
I believe I would.
Good.
think a June wedding would be lovely. Don't you, Bernard?
Yes. June 1906. Splendid.
But... well, that's 2 years away.
Would you rather wait?
Wait. No, I just...
Edith, I'm not going into general practice, you know. What we're doing at St. Mary's is not secure. It's all new. I mean, people still think we're charlatans. It's taken 50 years to rebuild forensic science since Thomas Smethurst poisoned Isabella Banks, and, well, you see, he got a free pardon because the scientific evidence was a mess. One piece of sloppy or wrong evidence in court would make us a laughingstock again. Sorry, I don't want you to be married to a failure. The way you're looking at me now, I don't want that to change. My serve, you say?
Yes. For the game.
Spilsbury, I believe congratulations are in order.
Thank you, Wilcox. Miss Horton is a fine young lady. I'm a lucky man. Brandy?
And soda? Thanks. When will you marry?
Spring 1906.
Ah, Bernard, ever the slave to impulse. She is. Here's to you both.
I say, Spilsbury, you've bagged the lovely Edith Horton at last. Well done. Well done.
Please, don't touch me.
Oh, sorry, old man.
Despite his remarkable good looks and imposing height, my husband shrank from intimacy, even though his pale grey eyes had a way of looking at you as if you were special, important to him. Well, you were, but merely as a specimen, something to be analysed like one of his microscopic slides. He couldn't help it. And despite resentment at what some mistook for rejection and others called his aloofness, he continued to attract both men and women with his exquisite manners, beautiful suits, immaculate spats, and the eternal flower in his buttonhole.
Sorry about that, Wilcox. I dislike familiarity. It's invariably a prelude to attempted possession.
And this is the man who I saw rolling on the floor with 3 5-year-olds pretending to be a donkey.
Children, they're different. Far from corporeal corruption, and they don't want anything from old Buggins.
Old? What are you, 29?
Late starter.
So, why did you decide to join the beastly science?
Well, my grandmother said I shouldn't be a GP.
But she doesn't mind you cutting up dead bodies?
No, she doesn't know. She hasn't got over me being turned down for the Methodist ministry, and she'd never forgive me working for clients who don't pay.
Oh, by the way, has Dr. Pepper told you yet? We're each to have a specialty for police work. I'm doing chemical compounds, and he wants you to specialise in scar tissue.
But I've been concentrating on criminal abortion.
Yes, I've heard you've had a couple of medical men struck off.
Well, it's not all old women in shawls handing out gin and knitting needles.
No, I just thought... Well, if a woman had been raped, surely there are mitigating circumstances.
My dear Wilcox, how can you talk like that? I dissect the bodies of females eviscerated by these butchers. The uterus often still contains a poisoned or mutilated fetus. These girls die of foolishness and men's brutishness. I have seen such wicked waste of life in the autopsy room.
I have too, Bernard. Abortion wasn't invented in 1900.
And it hasn't been eradicated in 1904. Forgive me, Wilcox, a bit of a hobby horse of mine. Women should be protected.
Yes, but if that protection fails, they shouldn't then be punished. We need provision for medical termination under hospital conditions.
Not in my lifetime, Wilcox. Never. Scar tissue, you say?
Yes. Well, as Dr. Pepper always says, make it your passion, sir. Make it your passion.
Passion? Yes. Well, I'll do what I can.
Passion was a word not often to be found in my husband's vocabulary. Physically, he was careful in the early days, and fastidious as he grew older. No doubt the corruption he saw daily affected his attitude to the body. I don't believe he ever found comfort in physical love, but the products of the act, our children, were the love of his life. I was what he described as his rock, and it was on me the waves of his obsession broke.
Bernard! Bernard Spilsbury, come here this minute!
Yes, I'm coming. Are you all right? The baby? What's happened?
Oh, Evelyn is fine, Bernard, but I am not.
Sit down. I'll fetch the smelling salts.
Bernard, stop. There is a leg in the pantry.
Ah.
A human leg.
The one with the scar on it.
Oh, is there another?
No. I needed it because it was severely burned.
I know it was, Bernard. What is it doing in my pantry?
It's cool.
Last week it was an arm. And last month, 2 fingers in the tea caddy.
I was just carrying them in there. I washed it out after. I told you, Dr. Pepper wants me to concentrate on scars. And, you see, the thing about scar tissue is, although it's healed skin, the skin changes its nature after damage. And if the wound is caused by fire, the squamous epithelium and the columnar, well, and the subcutaneous...
Stop it, Bernard, I don't care. After our honeymoon, you said no more body parts. After the ear in the butter dish, you said no more body parts. When Evelyn was born, you said no more body parts. When we get back from Minehead, I want you to promise me, as a Methodist and a Mason, no more body parts.
But there was no Minehead that year, 1910. No sooner had we arrived, but Bernard was called back. The police had found human remains at 32 Hilldrop Crescent, Camden Town. When I heard Dr. Crippen lived there, I simply assumed that, like my husband, he brought his work home with him. But soon the Times was calling it the North London cellar murder. Dr. Crippen's wife, Cora, was missing, and he had disappeared with a young woman called Ethel Leneve. Cora was a pretty colourful character by all accounts, and went by the name of Belle Elmore. Anyway, the Home Secretary, Winston Churchill, authorised a £250 reward for Crippen's capture. It was all a frightful ferment, especially when Crippen was found on board the Montrose sailing for Canada with Ethel dressed up as a boy. The captain sent a Marconigram to the police, and it was all so terribly exciting as they raced to get across the Atlantic before the ship docked.
Morning, Spilsbury. Wilcox.
Morning, Dr. Pepper.
I'm sorry to have ruined your holiday, Spilsbury, but this is a quite extraordinary case. See here. These 5 jars contain all the evidence we have that Belle Elmore, an American music hall artiste with aspirations to grand opera, is dead. Police theory is it's murder by the husband, Hawley Harvey Crippen. Now, he's saying she's run off with her lover and is happily playing Aida in California. Should we find evidence to the contrary, we will appear as expert witnesses for the Crown. Police and prosecution maintain he killed her, chopped her up and buried the contents of these jars under some bricks in the basement of their house. Crippen has asserted these remains must have been in the house when they moved in.
Is that possible, sir?
Good question, Spilsbury. Given the conditions in the basement, it is quite possible. You will observe. The flesh is discoloured, but not entirely decomposed. We have viscera wrapped in what appears to be a pyjama jacket, but no bones, no skull, no teeth. It will be our task to prove not only that this was murder, but also that this is indeed Mrs. Crippen. Now, we have no clue as to cause of death, so I want you, Wilcox, to look at poisons, test for everything. And, Spilsbury, you will find a mark on the piece of flesh in this jar. We need to establish if it is simply a deep fold caused by being compacted in the earth, or a scar.
Do we know if she had a scar?
As yet, no. We know little about the woman other than that she was the life and soul of any party, and she bleached her hair. Now, if you'll excuse me, gentlemen, I have a meeting with prosecution counsel. Just one last thing. This is by far the most important case we have been involved in this century. The eyes of the world will be upon us. Our reputation and that of our science will depend on the outcome.
So, if we can prove from virtually nothing that these bits and pieces are Cora Crippen, forensic medicine goes from frog to prince overnight.
Yes, but if you don't find poison and I don't find a scar, it's back in the pond for all of us.
But if it's established she had a scar and you find one in those jars, Spilsbury, just think what it could mean.
We don't even know if it's female. Look at it objectively, Wilcox. All Crippen did was run off with his girlfriend.
Who'd been wearing Cora's jewellery and furs?
Cora wouldn't need furs in California.
A woman doesn't leave her diamonds willingly.
If she hated her husband enough, she might.
You mean she may have wanted the police to think she was dead?
I don't know, Wilcox. All I do know is the laughingstock we'll be if this lot turn out to be the remains of the neighbour's dog.
How many dogs do you know who wear curlers and pyjamas?
I'm just being cautious, Wilcox.
Outside the laboratory, there was no such caution. People talked of little else. The newspapers printed every crumb of gossip they could find. They interviewed friends and acquaintances of the Crippens and dissected every rumour. Anyone who had anything to do with the case took on the aura of celebrity. Ladies smiled at me in the street and asked me if Bernard was going to appear, as if he was an actor in a West End play. While Bernard spent each day waiting for his entrance in the corridors of the Central Criminal Court, I waited at home, poring over the newspapers, overwhelmed by the sensational events we were caught up in.
My lord, gentlemen of the jury, I am Dr. Augustus Joseph Pepper. I am a master in surgery at the London University and a fellow of the Royal College of Surgeons. I am consulting surgeon at St Mary's Hospital. On the 15th of July, I found a piece of skin measuring 7 inches by 6 inches, which came from the lower part, the front, of the abdomen. There was a mark upon that piece which attracted my attention, and afterwards I examined it with particularity. I spent several hours examining it, and subsequently handed it to Dr. Bernard Spilsbury.
Dinner's ready, Bernard. Dinner. Lamb chops. Potatoes, cabbage and gravy.
I'll be down in a minute.
You said that 10 minutes ago.
I'm on the stand tomorrow.
I know, but you've got to eat. I'll empty the ashtrays. Oh, Bernard. There must be 50 cigarette ends in here. The whole room stinks.
Well, I can't smell anything.
No, but you can sniff a corpse as if it's a bunch of flowers.
I'm sorry.
Are you nervous? About tomorrow?
I don't think so.
I thought I might come and watch.
Oh, the public gallery of Court 2 of the Old Bailey is no place for a lady.
You may be in the newspapers. How does that feel?
Intrusive.
Aren't you even a little bit excited?
I shall be doing my job.
All right. I'll put your dinner over a saucepan to keep warm.
Thank you. Edith?
Yes, Bernard.
I heard a joke today.
Yes?
A man goes into a fishmonger's with a salmon under his arm and says to the man behind the counter, "Do you do fish cakes?" The fishmonger says, "Yes." "Oh, good, because it's his birthday." Edith, thank you for everything.
Oh, that's all right. Sure you won't come down?
I just want to write up my cards, everything we know so far, just to clear my mind for tomorrow.
I'm sure you'll be awfully good.
Close the door behind you.
Of course.
Presence of poisoning by hyoscine established by Wilcox. Drop from remains distilled by the Stas method entered into eye of laboratory cat. Presence of mydriatic alkaloid causing mydriasis. The excessive dilation of the pupil of the eye. This indicates cocaine, atropine, hyoscyamine or hyoscine. Last 2 derivatives of henbane. Dilated pupil of cat's eye held dilation under exposure to strong light. Therefore not cocaine, as pupil will show some contraction on exposure to light. Further tests proved positive for hyoscine. 2.7 grains, quarter grain sufficient to kill. 4 large pieces of skin and muscle, 1 from lower abdomen, with old operation scar, 4 inches long, broader at lower end. Scar, not fold, scar.
At dawn, Bernard was still in his workroom, and I was lying awake in bed, desperately fearful for him. I knew his minutes or hours in the witness box would dictate the rest of our lives. Neither of us could have guessed he was about to be catapulted into 37 years of public adoration, a word he found faintly distasteful, whether from a stranger or his own family.
Morning, Dr. Spilsbury. What can I do for you today? Nice white rose, maybe, for a change?
Thank you, Gertie. I'll just have a red one, please.
You're up on the Crippen case today, aren't you?
That's right.
Here, let's put that in your buttonhole. Your hands are shaking.
That's very kind of you, but I can manage.
I know you can, love, but you don't have to. Besides, it's not often I get a chance to be so close to the coming man, eh? You'll be too grand to talk to me soon.
I hope not, Gertie.
There. Handsome is as handsome does. Good luck, love.
My face obscured by a veiled hat, I took my seat in the public gallery of the court. Moments later, Dr. Crippen was led into the dock. I was surprised at how ordinary he seemed. The newspaper photographs had made him look sinister, with his eyes magnified by thick-lensed glasses. In court, though, he wasn't wearing them. He was a surprisingly small man, nondescript, with a round, balding head, long moustache and pale, sad eyes. He looked rather lost and forlorn. It seemed ridiculous that he might be so overcome with passion for the rather dull Miss Leneve that he would kill to have her. Suddenly the weight of British justice, the wigs, the language, the grim grandeur of the room seemed cruel. Surely this meek little chap couldn't be capable of not only murdering his wife, but chopping her up. Some said he'd taken her bones and most of the rest of the body to the cattle market. But my thoughts about the little doctor were interrupted by my husband's name being called. He walked calmly to the witness box and took the oath in his usual quiet voice. There was absolute silence as he began to speak.
I am a Bachelor of Surgery at Oxford University, and I hold the position of pathologist at St Mary's Hospital. I have on several occasions examined the piece of skin and flesh with a mark on it which was produced in court yesterday. I have formed the opinion that it comes from the lower part of the wall of the abdomen, near the middle. I base that opinion on the presence and arrangement of certain muscles. There is a large mass of muscle, which is the rectus muscle of the abdomen. There is a tendon on one side of that, an aponeurosis, a white, shining, fibrous membrane serving as the connection between muscle and tendon, and attached to the aponeurosis are other pieces of muscle. Besides that, there is a row of short, dark hairs at the lower margin of the piece, those hairs being, in my opinion, pubic hairs. On the 9th of September, I was asked by Mr. Pepper to make a microscopical examination of a section taken from that piece of flesh. The section that I got included a portion of the mark that has been called a scar. It was the middle part, with a piece of flesh on each side. I did not find any of the outer layer of skin, the epidermis, on the surface of the mark. I found a small mass embedded deeply on the scar at one spot, which to my mind indicates the line of incision of the skin by a previous operation. I took 2 other pieces of skin from other parts of the same preparation, from another part of the same specimen, and in those 2 pieces I found glands.
The jury was mesmerized, leaning forward to catch his soft voice and to catch his eye, too. He could seduce 12 good men and true just as easily as he did a gallery of sensation-chasing women. They would never know his desire to get inside people didn't extend to the living.
In the first piece of flesh that you found, did you find glands?
I found glands at each end of that specimen, Mr. Muir, on either side of what is called the scar. That piece has been cut up completely, but I have the microscopical preparations. I found no glands in the centre where there is the mark, called a scar, proving in fact that the mark is a scar. There were glands in the part of the skin where there is a mark or depression caused by folding. As the result of my microscopical examination, I say that the mark is undoubtedly an old operation scar.
Mr. Tabine, for the defence?
Thank you, my lord. Now, dealing with the question of the remains, must the person who removed the viscera have been a person of very considerable dexterity?
He must certainly have had considerable dexterity, yes.
And must that removal have been done by someone accustomed to evisceration?
The important thing that is fresh is that this witness said that on the scar there were no glands.
If it should be established that there is in the scar a sebaceous gland, or a hair and a hair follicle, that would be conclusive that it was not a scar.
You had heard, had you not, that Belle Elmore had had an operation on the lower part of the abdomen?
Yes, I believe I had read that in the press.
And did the condition of the skin, when you saw it for the first time on 9th of September, make it very difficult to form a clear opinion as to whether this was a scar?
It made it more difficult than if it had been fresh.
How did it go?
I'm not sure. Tabine's found 2 pathologists to challenge my evidence. 2. The thing is, this operation she had to have her ovaries removed, it would have been done in America.
Is that relevant?
Of course. They have a different method of stitching. If an American surgeon operated on Cora Crippen, the scar would not be the same in appearance as if the operation had been done here. I'm positive this is the scar of an American procedure.
You'll look like Quasimodo if you bend over that microscope much longer. You're not having doubts, are you?
Edith says I never change my mind.
What a gift. It takes me an hour to decide what to have for lunch.
I always have the same. I like routine.
Do you never feel tempted to, I don't know, have liver instead of the chops?
Well, yes. But temptation is the pleasure in itself. There is the possibility of disappointment if you give in. But maybe I should be more adventurous. I shall try the jam roll tomorrow. But then, don't you see, if I like the jam roll better than the sponge pudding, I shall have the jam roll the following day, and the pleasure will be less, lacking, as it will, the flavour of novelty. But if I return to sponge pudding, I'll continually be craving the excitement of that first mouthful of jam roll again. No, Wilcox.
You could have both.
Now you're just being silly.
Coming for a tincture?
When the trial's over.
Good night, then. And Bernard? Go home.
Bernard, I have a confession to make.
Oh dear. Have you spent the housekeeping on hats again?
No. I watched you in court today.
Oh.
It's all right. I wore a veil. No one recognised me.
Good. Good.
You were marvellous. Incredibly calm. Very authoritative.
You think so?
I do. I was awfully proud.
Well, just doing my job.
I know.
I'm being recalled. The defence is challenging my evidence.
How can they?
Well, they say there's no scar.
But you proved there was.
I asserted that there was. And, Edith...
Yes?
I'd rather you didn't come.
Oh. I didn't mean to upset you.
No, you haven't. I just don't want to lose concentration.
Of course not. I'm sorry. Well, time I was in bed. Are you coming?
In a minute.
Good night, then.
Good night.
I do love you.
Edith.
Yes?
I do hope you don't mind. I'm going to borrow a soup plate tomorrow.
I'd never lied to Bernard before, but these were the most important few days of his life, and he was my life. I went back to the Old Bailey. Mr. Devine, acting for Dr. Crippen, called Dr. Gilbert Turnbull Maitland. He took the stand with what I can only describe as a swagger. To him, Bernard was an upstart. As he recited his brilliant career and qualifications, Bernard's plodding progress suddenly looked shabby and inadequate.
Oxford, a member of the Royal College of Surgeons, London, a licentiate of the Royal College of Physicians, and I'm also a member of the Pathological Society of Great Britain, which is the largest pathological institute in the United Kingdom. In 1907, 1908 and 1909, the average number of post-mortem examinations made under my supervision was 1,251 each year.
Dr. Turnbull, does your microscopical examination enable you to say whether that is a scar?
It enables me to say that it cannot possibly be a scar. I have formed that opinion because of certain structures which are found in this area which have never been found in a scar before. First of all, there are two groups of hair follicles. In addition to that, one finds, as one would expect, a large piece of sebaceous gland. That mark is not, in fact, a scar. It was caused by the folding of the skin by pressure, which allowed the skin in that area to get somewhat dried. That, in my opinion, would account for the mark which has been called a scar.
Mr. Muir for the Crown.
Thank you, my lord. Dr. Turnbull, with your great experience, do you agree that this piece of skin comes from the lower part of the abdomen?
I am a qualified surgeon, but I never do any surgery. I cannot say definitely which part of the body that piece of skin comes from, but I have a very good idea. I would admit it comes from the lowest part of the abdomen.
Please remember you are here not as an advocate but as a witness, and the word admit is not the right word to use.
When I first examined that piece of flesh, I formed a different opinion, but I had been promised that I would not be called as a witness.
You gave your first opinion on the understanding that you would not be called as a witness.
No, I would not say that.
But in your opinion, which you first gave, did you state that the aponeurosis was absent from that piece of flesh?
No. I said that I thought there was an absence of aponeurosis characteristic of the abdomen. My opinion now is that it is from the lower part of the abdominal wall.
Dr. Spilsbury, please approach with the exhibit.
Bernard walked towards the witness box. He was holding one of my plain white soup plates. In it was a slice of Belle Elmore's belly. I managed to stop myself calling out, though I resolved to raise it with him over dinner.
Dr. Turnbull, did you find there the abdominal muscle?
What muscle?
The rectus abdominis, the one we use when we bend over.
Yes, I think so.
Do you find there part of the tendon which attached that muscle to the pubic bone?
I had not seen that.
Do you see it now? Dr. Spilsbury, please point it out.
There is a tendon there, and if that is the rectus, it is.
Please answer this one way or the other. It is most important. Do you find that tendon there or not?
Yes.
Do you know the American method of stitching the abdominal wall where it is cut open for the purposes of an operation, the method by which the stitches do not come to the surface except at the beginning and the end?
There are several methods. I did not find the mark of a stitch there.
I put it to you that it is not at all uncommon for part of the epidermis, including glands, to be folded in when the wall is sewn up.
I've only read of that.
You have never seen it?
No. I am familiar with the appearance, but not from operations. From accidents, it is very familiar.
I am talking about an operation scar.
The appearances are similar.
How do you know if you have never seen them?
I've read about them.
Now, I put it to you that the inclusion of epidermis in the incision made for the purposes of an operation was easily mistaken for sebaceous gland.
No. I know the appearance of these inclusions because I know accidental ones are similar to those in operations. Such inclusion might, by somebody unaccustomed to the microscope, be mistaken.
We are not talking about people unaccustomed to the microscope. We are talking about Dr. Spilsbury.
Bernard's expression didn't change. I knew, though, that the skin on his cheekbones would have reddened slightly, but whether because of the implied compliment or the affront to his modesty, even I couldn't tell. Dr. Wall was next in the witness box. He was not as confident as Turnbull had been, and admitted he too had given his opinion to the defence, not expecting to be called as a witness. He made a poor show, dithering and doubtful. Dr. Crippen seemed to slump as Bernard was recalled by Mr. Muir. After the blustering inadequacy of the last two expert witnesses, Bernard's calm, unwavering integrity stilled the court.
Dr. Spilsbury, am I right in thinking that you are much influenced by the opinions of Mr. Pepper, your senior at St. Mary's?
I attended lectures by Mr. Pepper, and I also received clinical teaching from him. Otherwise, I was associated with him at St. Mary's only by acting as a surgical dresser, as a student. The fact that I acted with Mr. Pepper has absolutely no influence upon the opinion that I have expressed here. I have no doubt that this is a scar. I have also said that if any gland or hair follicle exists in that place, it will conclusively prove that it is not a scar.
Is there anything which might be mistaken for a gland that you saw?
There is one small mass of included epidermis in the scar. In a surgical operation where the edges of the skin are brought into contact, it is common for at least one side to turn in a little, and as the scar forms, some of the embedded surface stuff covering the skin may become enclosed in the scar and embedded in it. I found such a piece of included epidermis in this mark, which I say is a scar, and having found that, I think there is no doubt as to its being a scar.
Dr. Spilsbury, you reached this conclusion uninfluenced by your more senior colleagues?
I have an independent position of my own, my lord, and I am responsible for my own opinion, which has been formed on my own scientific knowledge and not in any way influenced by my supposed connection with Mr. Pepper. The embedding of a piece of edge of the cut would come about in the process of the healing of the scar. That piece of embedded flesh would really be something that got in after the cut, and it might contain both follicles and sebaceous glands, so that one would have to be careful in diagnosing this. I have absolutely no doubt in my own mind as regards the scar. And I have my microscopic slides here, and I have sent for my microscope in case it might be wanted.
Thank you, Dr. Spilsbury. Gentlemen of the jury, I think we will avail ourselves of Dr. Spilsbury's offer. Therefore, given the o'clock, we will adjourn for luncheon and reconvene at 2 p.m.
Bernard acknowledged this extraordinary departure with a sharp inclination of his head. He had taken the Lord Chief Justice by surprise in the most sensational trial of the decade, and yet far from being reprimanded for his insolence, the highest judge in the land was acquiescing to his suggestion. It was astonishing. No one had ever had the audacity. Producing a microscope to demonstrate his evidence as if he were giving a lecture. It was so typical of Bernard that I almost giggled. He quietly collected his microscope and followed Mr. Muir into a side room, where after lunch the Lord Chief Justice, the jury, and the legal representatives of both sides joined them.
My lord, gentlemen, if you would look down the microscope, keep both eyes open. As you do so, I will adjust the focus should you find it necessary. On slide A, you will see a transverse section from the centre of the mark, called a scar. Would you like to be first, sir? Allow your eyes to accustom themselves to the microscope for a moment. You will observe on slide B, beside it, a transverse section of human tissue from the lower abdomen which bears no scar. You will observe beneath the epidermis, or skin, glands, rounded in shape, called sebaceous, providing the oil, sebum, which lubricates the skin. You see also follicles or roots of hairs, rather like the bulbs at the base of a daffodil stalk. Look back at slide A, and you will observe neither is present. In further slides, you will see the thickening and signs of glands where the edges of the wound have been turned in.
Bernard? How was it?
I've run out of cigarettes.
Oh, there's some here.
No.
I always keep your spare packet.
Thank you.
Cup of tea?
Oh, please.
Well?
Well, what?
What about the defence witnesses? The two doctors?
Good men, ill prepared. Is Evelyn asleep?
Yes.
I think I'll just go up and look in on her.
Since our daughter was born, he liked to sit watching over her. Once I went to join him. His unreadable face was lined with tears. I'd never seen him cry before, and never in all our marriage did I ever witness it again. Evelyn, held in the crook of his arm, woke up when his tears dropped onto her face. She looked up into his eyes, smiling.
Bernard? Bernard? The papers! Come down and look at the morning papers.
What's all the fuss?
Look, Bernard. Every paper. The Mail, Times, Herald. You're on the front page of every one. Bernard Spilsbury creates a sensation. Spilsbury, a young man of immense presence and promise. Dr. Spilsbury gave his evidence with a directness, assurance and authority rarely seen. There can be no doubt we will be seeing much more of him. Well, aren't you happy?
It's very gratifying.
I think we should have a party.
Oh, I feel that may be inappropriate before the end of the trial, particularly as, if found guilty, Dr. Crippen will be hanged.
Yes, of course. I'm sorry.
And there's something else.
What?
There's no direct evidence he did it.
Henry Hawley Crippen, you have been convicted upon evidence which could leave no doubt in the minds of any reasonable man that you cruelly poisoned your wife, that you concealed your crime, you mutilated her body, and disposed piecemeal of her remains. I now have to pass upon you the sentence of the court, which is that you be taken from hence to a lawful prison, and from thence to a place of execution, and that you be hanged by the neck until you are dead, and that your body be buried in the precincts of the prison where you have last been confined after your conviction. And may the Lord have mercy on your soul.
You know, Wilcox, I went up to listen to the bell ring when Crippen was hanged. It's an eerie sound. And you know what? In his ordinary job, the hangman's a hairdresser.
You're joking.
No, I'm not. You can't earn a living in executions.
Well, here's to you, Bernard.
And to you, William. I suppose we ought to raise a glass to Cora Crippen, too. She seems to have launched forensic science into the 20th century.
Well, she certainly launched you. You're travelling faster than Halley's Comet.
Oh, no. I was born to be a tortoise, not a hare. I suppose, though, if all this fuss comes to mean anything, I'd just like to be able to make a difference.
The Times said Sir Bernard did more than make a difference. He revolutionised the position of the scientific witness in British courts. It was an obituary he'd have been proud of. How silly I must have been to think Bernard would ever be ordinary. Even in death I had to share him. He'd been a fixed star in the public firmament for 37 years, and people wanted to mourn him. He would have been horrified that strangers were still being familiar. But he was a hero, a giant. He introduced the preservation of the integrity of scenes of crimes and invented the murder bag. He appeared at every great murder trial since the Crippen case and was adored by a public fascinated by his expertise and for a long time his good looks, despite his habit of hiding behind a newspaper when confronted by a camera. It's hard to love a suicide. One keeps making excuses. Perhaps it was an accident. He didn't realise the gas was on. If only he'd talked to me. But he insisted on living alone close to his lab. He couldn't sleep. Apparently, lack of sleep is a factor in 70% of suicides. But there was more to it than that, of course. He'd been the greatest name of his day, but younger, sharper minds attacked his reputation, and it crumbled like the joints of his arthritic hands. And now? Well, everyone knows the name of Dr. Crippen, but almost no one remembers Dr. Spilsbury, my husband, the incomparable witness.
In The Incomparable Witness by Nicola McAuliffe, Bernard Spilsbury was played by Timothy Watson, the narrator by Joanna David, and younger Edith by Honeysuckle Weeks. Wilcox by Dan Starkey, Pepper and Muir, Sam Dale, Tabine, Chris Pavlo, Turnbull, Stephen Critchlow, the Lord Chief Justice, John Rowe, Gertie by Helen Longworth, and George was played by Nyasha Hatendi. The director was Sasha Yevtushenko.